Hello, one and all, and welcome back to another episode of Interstellar Radio, podcast focused on NACL, partnered with Supernova and NRG Kia. As always, hosting the podcast is Gordo over there and other side, and myself, RMC, or Random Minion Caster. And since we are partnered with NRG Kia, today our special guest happens to be somebody who's hitting up the team and who'll be able to give us all the down low on all the information. It is, of course, Coach Thinkcard. Welcome to the show. How are you doing, Coach?
Yeah, I'm doing well. It's good to be here. I've seen some of your shows already, so I'm just excited to get started.
Excellent. I'm glad you still came on after seeing them.
Well, yeah, good. I was going to say, that's a rough one. That's rough to hear as you start coming on in.
Well, I'm sure you've seen some, so you know what comes next, Coach Thinkcard. Of course, it's going to be two truths and a lie, and I heard you've prepared some possibly league-related truths and a lie to test us on. You have a long, illustrious career, so I'm sure there's plenty you can draw on there.
All right, so here's my two truths and a lie. So, 1, I won a game as a player in LCS. 2, I've gotten rank 1 as a player. And 3, every time I travel to a country for League, I get Masters in 10 days or less.
Ooh, all right. They're all player accomplishments. I am not, so I'm like 90% sure. He's definitely played games in LCS. I'm like 90% sure he's won one in there too. He was subbing in for CLG at times. I think, was it only CLG or did you play for another team too? You don't have to answer that, by the way.
All you guys.
Yeah. Wait, hold up. I know you play NACS, like the old NACL, and then you subbed for CLG. Wasn't that was an international event, wasn't it? Was one of the? Did you play LCS as a player?
He definitely played a couple games at least, I thought. I don't know if he won those games though. That's where that's tough. Like I think he was on I think he played on Bizarro CLG. I think he played on the CLG team that came in while they were scrimming in Korea. That like whole fiasco. Like where they sent the whole team to Korea to scrim with Monte Cristo and they ran subs for like 2 weeks. I thought Thinkcard was on that team. I could be wrong.
Carter, we're saying a lot on this first one. So do we believe Thinkcard has gotten rank 1 as a player?
Yeah, I believe that.
Okay, yeah, I believe that too.
I believe that. He was a good player for a while, for a couple years. He is not saying you're a bad player now, but like he was
like a relevant. I'm 31 years old. I get it.
He was a relevant pro player for a decade ago for a period of time. I think it's definitely in the cards that, no pun intended, that he got rank 1 at some point during that time. I'm not going to doubt that one. He was an active pro player for a period of time. It very, very feasible to hit rank 1. What was the third? The third one is he hits Masters in 10 days or less. That's also super feasible for a professional level player.
Sure.
The question is, how washed do we think Thinkcard is in 2024, where he's doing the bulk of his international, like when he went to Korea 4 months ago.
And he's got to do it in Korea too, the Korean server.
Did he hit Masters in 10 days or less? Like that seems, I don't know, 10 days or less, grinding it out feels not undoable. I'm gonna guess he's never won a game. I'm gonna guess he's like, I'm gonna guess he's whatever the opposite of undefeated is. So I'm gonna guess he's winless in LCS.
Because I'm trying to remember. Like I know you did a short stint in the LCS, but I'm just trying to remember if
I think it was always as a sub. I don't think he was ever like a starter.
Yeah, because
he had that long run on
you
CLG
started
Black too.
You didn't start on CLG. You started on it was Snoopy's team. It was Snoopy's team. That you played for. I remember.
Oh, he did. He played a game on Evil Geniuses too.
Yeah, Evil Geniuses. That was the old
original
Evil Geniuses. Okay, so yeah. He did play us.
I'm gonna say he's winless. I'm going with it. I'm locked in. RMC, are you locked in?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's that you haven't won the LCS match. I think that's the most likely, because I believe you've gone rank 1 as a player. I know you're smart enough, you're good enough to do that. every time you travel, get Master in 10 days or less. That's the one I'm kind of stuck on. But you know what? I think Masters is doable, even in Korea. It's doable. So yeah, I'm going with you've never won a game in the LCS despite how good you are.
Yeah, you guys are correct. I'm 0-6 in the LCS. On EG, we're 0-2. And on CLG Bizarro, we went 0-4, even though
I was right. You were on Bizarro.
probably should have won some of those games.
Oh. All right.
You know
No
what?
shame. No shame.
Yeah, you went into the sub, right? It's always hard for a sub to just slot in
Yeah.
and make it happen. So,
Yeah. But I
no.
did sub in for CLG at an international tournament, and we got second, so that's pretty cool.
Oh, okay. Was that Cologne? I
am Cologne.
Hey, all the other events, I remember those. Yeah, and you know what? That's better than getting a win at LCS, getting second. That's like as close as NA gets to international success, right?
Yeah, not bad.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was the golden era, right? We're still top 2 in events with good regularity, but good stuff there. We keep the records alive, RMC. Pretty happy to hear that one. So wanna dive in then to a little bit about the relationship between NACL and LCS. You've obviously come up and down between the two over the course of your career, Thinkcard.
Yeah.
Just wanted to talk a little bit about what, in your opinion, it takes to make the transition from NACL to LCS. I think your team, since you came into CLG, now NRG, in 2022, has kind of become the poster child for making that jump, right? You guys built that original roster very specifically out of the top players in Academy, as it was known at the time.
Yeah.
And have converted that now into an LCS championship roster. So curious on your thoughts on how you scout for it, what it takes to make the jump, and what that process is like in your opinion.
Yeah, so as a player, it's obviously hard. You're up against thousands and thousands of other players who are trying to do it too, trying to make their dreams a reality. So one, work ethic, super important. Two, attitude. It's very easy to just be grinding and kind of there are a lot of like athletes that are coming out now that are basically talking about how they wish they knew what they knew now, because then they wouldn't have just like spent so much time just forcing hours into the game instead of making those hours more productive and then using some of their other time to like, work on their mental health and stuff like that. So I think it's really important to make sure you have a good attitude so you don't burn yourself out and you keep your hours productive. And then besides that, you just have to showcase your skills. So it's always going to be a combination of communication, mechanics, and map movements, but you can kind of always work on like your map movements on a team later when you get like better infrastructure, better teammates, better coaches. So it's really a combination of a lot of things. And so let's just go look at 100 Thieves right now. So 100 Thieves, they're kind of doing what we did 2 years ago, which is they brought in a lot of academy talent, amateur talent, and they are trying to make it work they have like 1 or 2 veterans, which is a little bit different. But for the most part, they have a very young roster. And in order to make that work, like if we go back to what we did, we had a lot of just fresh talent in general. So we knew that we'd go into it and we'd have a lot of holes. We knew that Palafox and Contracts had some synergy together. We knew Luger and Poom had some synergy together. And Jenkins was a rock in the top lane. But we knew that there are going to be holes in our gameplay, and we're going to have to fix that with a lot of hours. And we're going to have to fix that with either maybe some roster changes if we can't figure out a way to just like kind of mold the team into what we want it to be. So with 100 Thieves, they went with a more developed approach, which is they have River in the jungle, they're going to have some more leadership, and then they get to develop the talent around it, and that's like a way to kind of boost it up. It's more of like an immediate result type of thing where they're going to do better at first, and then we'll see kind of how they do going into the future. So I think either one of those is viable ways to start kind of a new generation or a new roster from scratch. And I think if you're not doing it one of those two ways, the way we did it or the way they did it, you're kind of fucking up because you're just putting together a roster and hoping you win this split or this year. And then if it doesn't work, you're just doing it again. You're not really investing in yourself. So if you believe in your coaches, you believe in your system, you should do it the way that we did it and the way that 100 Thieves did it.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask as well, because I know you mentioned like as a player showcasing, your mechanics, your communication, stuff like that. How important is winning? Like, does it really matter to like does winning the NACL like say does that increase the value of the player in your eyes as a develop when you're looking for developing players?
There's some players who do better when they're winning for sure. But there are a lot of players that stand out even when their team isn't doing that well. Let's take Jojo for instance. Like his academy team never did very well. Even in a lot of his games on stage, well, even look last split, uh, they started off very strong and then teams started to kind of collapse. Like he always looked like a very, for the most part, like he was playing well and he was doing his job. He wasn't having poor fundamentals even when his team was losing. So it is easy, especially when you're younger, to kind of fall into these bad habits and mistakes when the team's not performing very well. But if you have a really good mindset, you can still look good and look like you're doing your job well if your team isn't performing at the highest level.
Mhm.
So I would say it helps because a lot of players, like, it's easier for them to showcase their skills when their team is winning. But it's
Yeah.
definitely very, very possible to do it even when your team isn't performing that well.
Okay.
That makes
you.
sense. While you were talking about building up the team in 2022, I was kind of curious. Do you, when you guys were putting that team together, and I don't know how much of a direct hand you had, how much was Kamikaze Platypus and the GMs you guys had at the time,
Yeah.
but was it? Were you guys consciously attempting to go for an academy only team? Did it end up that way when you looked at kind of all the options were available, or were you guys like deliberately saying, yeah, 2021 was a bust for CLG. We are very deliberately trying to restart fresh, rebuild with new, quote unquote, new talent only. Obviously, Palafox and Contracts had stints in the LCS before, but were in academy at the time. We're not LCS starters at the time.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I worked with Jonathan um, on Golden Guardians Academy, and we talked about, like, because he was getting offers and kind of looking to see like what type of manager jobs are out there in the LCS space, and so we were kind of talking about it, and he only accepted the job if they were going to do things this way, and I was already on completely the same page with him, which is why when we both went into it, we already knew that we were basically going to start from scratch. We're just going to get rid of everything. We're going to start our own infrastructure, and we're going to get this young talent, and we're going to try to mold them the way that hopefully we can with good infrastructure and make slight roster adjustments. And the ultimate plan was that it will take maybe 3 years before we're a top team in the LCS.
Mhm.
And we ended up doing it in 2 years, which is obviously great. But there's maybe a little bit of luck involved, or like the players performed better than, or got better faster than we thought they would did, and they developed synergy faster than that we thought they do. So yeah, I mean, we definitely knew going into it that this is the way we wanted to do it, and we weren't going to work there if they wanted to do it the other way.
All right, that's really good to hear and really cool to see that that was able to pay off for you guys. So talking about tier 2 and what it looks like these days compared to when that roster came together, what it was like when you were on it with Golden Guardians Academy, or even looking further back into like Challenger Series era, stuff like that. NA Tier 2, at least compared to the franchising era, feels a lot more open and accessible than previously, but there's also way less investment and there's fewer LCS slots to promote into as of this year. What's your current outlook on the tier 2 environment as it compares to those previous renditions, right? Challenger Series into Academy into what we have today.
Yeah, I'm honestly like very curious to what a lot of the players have to say about this,
Mhm.
because I've only talked to maybe a few of them about it. From my perspective, it's, I don't know, like 10 years ago, 9 years ago, there really wasn't that much infrastructure at all in the tier two system. And so it kind of was like built up very quickly. A lot of money went into it. And then now it's kind of like going back to, it's still better than it was way in the past, but like it leaves a lot to be desired. So I don't know, it seems that for a player that really wants to make this dream a reality, there are a lot of sacrifices they have to make to really chase that. Which is why it's actually kind of cool that like Maryland, MU is doing so well, because
Mhm.
if the collegiate path is a viable path to do, then now you know you're going to have good coaches, you know you're going to have good infrastructure. You don't have to make as many sacrifices in terms of just your overall progress in the world if League of Legends doesn't work out. So yeah, I mean it's hard. You look at other sports too, and there are very few people that make it into the pro in NBA, pro in the NFL, like become professional soccer players. And for every 10 that you see on the field when you're watching TV, there's thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of players who didn't make it that far and sacrificed a lot to get there. So yeah, it takes a lot of sacrifice, but I don't know. I think the infrastructure is still getting better, and coaches are getting a lot better in tier two as well.
I think that's a good positive outlook. I'm going to go off script a little bit here as well, and I'm sure RMC and Leanne are sick of my shit for this, but that's a, that's okay with me.
It's a podcast. It's fun. We chill.
The I'm curious about, because I think you've got a interesting perspective here, because you touch throughout your career a lot of different aspects of this. Something that I've thought about a lot has been kind of norm setting around what it means to perform well in the NACL, and I've stated publicly a lot of times that I feel like a big gap that there's constantly been is that the best players in tier two, whether it be academy or NACL, have not consistently been able to find ways to make it into the major league despite performing at the highest level in tier two. And as somebody who both kind of built a roster using that approach in 2022 with your rebuild, kind of just saying best player available, every position in NACL,
Mhm.
and as someone who was on an organization with Copy when he chose to retire in 2023, following the reduction in tier two. Uh, how do you feel like that? Uh, do you feel like there's a kind of cyclical issue in tier two where the best players can't move up? It results in everybody taking the league less seriously. And then in turn, it makes the talent production that can come out of that league worse, and that feeds into itself? Or do you feel like the eras where it's been difficult to promote have just been that talent maybe isn't necessarily poking their head above water enough to be noticed, and it's kind of a problem that is more based in the talent pool available?
I understand what you're saying. I think it definitely is a little bit discouraging, and I can see why some players lose motivation. Copy, for instance, I thought that he was an LCS level player. I think that a team probably should have picked him up. It just so happened that we had Palafox, who's one of the best mid laners in the region. So um, I'm surprised that another team didn't pick him up. I know that, like, as another player in challengers in academy, you see Copy not get picked up, and it's like, what am I doing? Like, if he's not being picked up by a team, like, why am I putting in these many hours if I might not get picked up, even if I'm like a top 6 player in the role in the region? So it's discouraging for sure. I do think that, especially this year when like you do get the reduction. So like last year we saw just NACL kind of like lose funding from LCS teams, and then this year we had the reduction of LCS teams. So these 2 past years have been really, or this coming year and the past year have been really hard for challenger players, and I really feel for them because it really sucks. Um, and hopefully in the future, if we do get more teams in LCS, and we do get like past this esports winter, which everyone is talking will have an end at some point, then we will have more options to be able to bring in these players and be able to actually have like more flowing more flow from academy and challenger to LCS.
Mhm.
Um, and also hopefully more teams are just doing what we did and what 100 Thieves is doing, because 100 Thieves is 6-3 right now, right?
Yeah.
And you have a bunch of teams that don't have any talent and don't have players from NACL, and they're not doing as well, and they're probably spending more money. So hopefully people are seeing what we did and what 100 Thieves is doing, and will just give more players shots from NACL. And for the players that are in NACL, like, I totally understand why it's discouraging. But you just have to believe that if you put in the work and you are good enough and you uh, really have a good attitude about it, then someone will notice and you will get your shot.
Like to hear that outlook. That yeah, there's hope to be had, and that maybe there'll be more opportunities like that with rebuilds in the future. I do hope that between it feels like every year there's been one, right, between Evil Geniuses in 2022 and then you guys in 2023 to a large degree, and then
Yeah.
2024 now it looks like it might be 100 Thieves. There's just
Mhm.
been this pattern of somebody chooses to invest heavily in tier two, or in players coming out of tier two, and finds a lot of success from it. So hopefully that trend starts to pick up a little bit more. Wanted to pivot a little bit towards practice regimen as well, just a little bit, because we heard a little bit about Surdy was mentioning that they were not scrimming up at the tier one level quite as much in an interview recently, and I've heard in other discussions with some NACL leadership and stuff that there's been a decent amount of scrimming between tier one and tier two this year. Especially, I assume that's a result of the reduction in team size, but maybe it's been a little bit more of a norm for some of the teams anyway. Kind of curious as to how, from your position, NRG at least decides how do they structure practice, how do they decide who to scrim, and what is that culture kind of like in the LCS?
Yeah, so for the most part, honestly, scheduling scrims is kind of a shit show right now. You just every 6 p.m. on Tuesday, every team goes on their computer and you just DM each other as quickly as possible to fill out your blocks for the next week, and it's an absolute shit show. So if you have like some slots that it's hard to fill, then you'll get like some of the better NACL teams. And since there are some like super weeks where you can't scrim 3 other teams because you play them that weekend, and you only have like those 2 minutes to fill up all your blocks, you actually do have some free scrim blocks that you can then go to NACL and scrim. So I do think kind of the structure of everything is why there might be more NACL scrim partners. Um,
Mhm.
but in general, I've actually been super impressed by by the NACL teams. We've been scrimming a decent amount of them, and they
Okay.
are a lot better than they have been in the past. Like just overall map movements, getting their resets off on time, coming out of base with purpose. It's very clear that a lot of them always have plans, and they always have a very good idea of what they want to do, which is honestly like quite impressive compared to last few years. So we scrimmed Supernova. They absolutely shit on us in the beginning of this year. So like there is a lot of talent in NACL,
Mhm.
and I've been quite impressed by them in scrims, to be honest.
Sounds almost like Champs Queue, except with teams instead of players right now. I did want to follow up though a little bit because I mean, Energy Kia is now partnered with Supernova, right? So you mentioned you'll scrim together. Does it
Yeah.
benefit y'all to have like a specific NACL team that you're partnered with? Like, do y'all w- does the Supernova squad like kind of play a certain like? Do you tell them, hey, we want you to scrim this way as practice for like another team that we might be playing against, that sort of deal, or is it more just like, oh well, we just get priority on your scrim?
We can. Honestly, we haven't done that.
Hmm.
There hasn't been too much back and forth between the two teams at the moment. They are kind of doing their own thing, and we're kind of doing our own thing. The players do have
Okay.
access to our coaches if they do have like questions to DM like any of our positionals, because obviously they're very skilled in those specific roles. So,
Mhm.
but in terms of just asking them to play a certain way, we haven't really done that. We've only scrimmed them maybe once or twice. Um, and besides that, not too much back and forth.
Okay, so more just like variety and just filling those odd sort of scrim slots. Okay.
Yeah. Curious, from
Yeah.
your position, were you kind of an advocate for getting involved in tier two a little bit more from NRG? Is it something that kind of just happened in the background and you became aware of it after the fact? Is there anywhere in between that spectrum, or uh, I guess that's question one. We'll start with that, and then what are your thoughts on these kinds of partnerships and how the LCS can try to remain involved in tier two even without the academy system?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm huge on it. I don't know if you guys know, but like every single off season, as soon as it ends, I try to like help out amateur players where I can. I watch every single scouting combine. I ask to be invited to the Discord so I
Wow.
can watch every single
I have
scouting
seen that.
combine I can, and like watch all these the new talent come in and watch them perform, listen to them communicate. So I do have like this pretty big list of players like in my head, and I've them written down somewhere at home, that just players I'm interested in, players that I think have potential, players that I think if given more resources can make that jump to LCS and be good players in the league. and Supernova just has a few of those players that we're very interested in, which is why we reached out and wanted to do the partnership, because we know that like with the proper resources and with some more attention and with a good team environment, they can they have what it takes to make the jump.
As far as supporting tier 2 players, do you have an opinion on the efficacy of a strategy like NRG is going for with supporting a full NACL team? And obviously you guys aren't the ones footing the bill for everything, but you're at least partnering up and
Mhm.
giving resources where you can, compared to an approach like Shopify has taken with Tomio, where they've kind of brought in a substitute and are kind of giving them that kind of firsthand exposure. I have my own opinions on it, but I'm curious to hear on what your kind of thoughts are on those two different approaches.
They both have their strengths and weaknesses for sure. I think bringing in Tomio, he gets a lot of good experience, right? He gets to see what an LCS team, how they communicate. He gets to basically, if he's with the coaches while the coaches are watching the game, he gets to kind of listen to some of the conversations they're having. And so it's like you kind of get to warp your idea of the game, because sometimes when you're playing, it feels so clouded. Like it feels so much more complicated than it actually is. When in reality, like most games are won or lost because someone missed a base timer or you didn't push out an extra wave and then you weren't at Dragon on time. So it kind of like lets you rethink the game in a way that makes the game seem more simple, which is useful. Um, but if you do say like we're partnering with Supernova, we do very much believe that they have good coaches and good infrastructure. So ultimately, playing is invaluable experience, and not only just playing in general, but playing with other players that you know are talented and you know that are just rational people. So then like you can kind of build those skill sets as a player of giving criticism to each other, listening to each other, communicating, just all those things that it takes to be a successful teammate, which you can only do if you're on a team, right? If you're a sub, it's harder to build those skills. Um, but but yeah, I think they both have their strengths and weaknesses. I think it's better for players to be able to play and be on a team. But that being said, some orgs don't have the resources to be able to do that, and they'd rather bring one or two players on board to be able to really hone their skill sets and kind of help them get to the top. So I think both are good. If you're doing either one, I think that's a good thing. I think doing neither of those is worse than doing either one.
That's
Yeah,
fair.
I like the little subtext there about playing with rational people. I can feel the solo queue trauma there. Okay, well,
That might
I
even
think
that might even go beyond solo queue. Thinkcard's been around for a while. There may be some less rational people in the history in the history books there, especially early days.
oh man, that'd be like an interesting thing to get into as well, to think to ask you who some of the least rational people are. But you know what? On this podcast, I think we won't subject you to that. Think not this time, maybe next time. For now, though, let's hop into the NACL because that's what we're here for, right? This podcast, and we just passed the halfway mark, week 4 of 8. It was the sort of super week, if you will, of NACL. We had 7 matches this week, which I think is the most we'll get in any one week. And quite a few interesting things happened. So, gents, I wanted to kind of ask y'all, halfway through so far, has any particular players or teams stood out for you? And if so, like why? Which ones? What reasons?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. I think
Mhm.
it's no secret. I think Maryville University being at the top is very interesting.
Mhm.
They have very good mid jungle synergy. I think Spyrex, no matter what, I mean, we see a lot of his Azir plays, but it seems like just in general, he's very consistent and always
Yeah.
doing his job. And I've worked with Niles. Niles is a great shot caller. I know that he's keeping everyone, logical and giving good criticism and taking criticism well behind the scenes. So just in
Mhm.
general, it just seems like a very healthy team,
Yeah.
and it's good to see them on top. I think it's something that really shows that they're doing things right over there, which is nice.
Is it a surprise to you? Like I know at the start of the season, the Maryville roster kind of changed at the last second, so a lot of people had them ranked lower. But I'm curious, like this now's UG
Mhm.
Spyrex, Jerry Zyko roster. If you hadn't seen them play up to now, and you just heard it at the beginning of the season, would you have put them tied first with FlyQuest challengers?
I don't think so. That's just so surprising. I feel like a lot of their players are kind of just stepping up, and that's
Mhm.
what happens sometimes when the team just clicks. So it
Yeah.
looks like they've clicked, and every player is kind of performing, whether they're underperforming before and now they're performing at their actual ability now. They are
Mhm.
just like their ball lane is just performing very well compared to last year, and like you said, their mid jungle is just they're just consistently good, which
Yeah.
is not something that's easy to do.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
Agree
Gordo?
there. The thing about Maryville that's stood out to me so much, and maybe this is the wrong way to conceptualize it, but what I've been trying to figure out this split is like what makes this team different and are what makes them perform better than Fly Challengers last split. Because those are both teams that I think were really focused around this UG Spyrax duo. And then you look pound for pound, you would think that Fly Challengers would be the more impressive team between the two. They had Faisal in the top lane, they had Masu in bot, who is now in LCS and killing it over there, and they had Winsome at support as well. Um, I'm curious on your guys' thoughts too. For me, I do wonder if it's somewhat weaker competition as well. Like last year, it was like TL Challengers was so good. I think they've not been as good this year. And they're on a totally different roster as well. Everybody but Kim Down is elsewhere. Evil Geniuses Challengers is now the core of that is now in FlyQuest Challengers, and they're obviously up there at the top as well. And then like I think this year's DSG is weaker. They've lost a lot of their pieces up to LCS. I think this year's Fear, or last year's Fear was also kind of up there contending. I think they're most comparable to this year's Supernova, but it feels like Supernova maybe not, at least not being able to hit Maryville the same way that Cincy Fear roster was able to last year. Um, so maybe it's the weaker competition is what I'm starting to think of a little bit. Maybe they're just hitting a little, it's just a hot streak, right? They're 8-2 right now. They ended last split 24-12. So it's not a crazy different win rate. It is notable, but it's not, it's hard to tell. It might just be a couple of games swinging
Yeah.
differently. Maybe they are just, very, very comparable to that team.
Yeah, I think, do you want to take that about last splits, FlyQuest Challengers versus this splits, Maryville before? I should get your opinion in first.
I don't know. They definitely obviously Masu moving up is like a pretty big deal. But back to what you're talking about with Fear, like Fear from last year, kind of I think a lot of the pieces are still like they are kind of still over the place, right? Like you still have
Mhm.
Perry on DSG who is doing pretty
Yeah.
well, but that roster just in general like isn't as stacked as DSG was last year.
Yeah.
And
And I
then
mean like team by team
Supernova
too. Like it just
Sochi,
feels
like
like they can't find the team to be able to beat them. Apologies. Sorry. You're I think the camera's a little desynced. I can't tell when you're talking and when you're not. But please continue. I'm sorry.
yeah, and then Supernova, just talking about our team. Shochi has been very consistent. I do think a lot of people kind of overlooked him too because I don't know. In the past, he didn't like. I thought he performed very well, but he didn't get that much recognition. And
Mhm.
Shochi now is kind of showing that he's doing it again. And then when we're talking about Supernova versus Maryville, I do think that Supernova kind of had an off day because you look at some of their games later and they weren't making some of those fundamental mistakes they made in those games. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see a rematch if it happens or when it happens.
Yeah, 100%. I can't wait for them to play in playoffs because I'm confident both of them will be there and they'll go deep. I do want to say I think last split had a higher ceiling and a lower floor than this split of NACL did.
I'd
So
agree
when
with
I
that.
looked at the FlyQuest Challengers roster from last split, I mean, they were second in the regular season, right? So I think they were a strong team. They showed that. And maybe in playoffs, they did stumble a little bit. I don't think that takes away from how strong they were. And I think, that UG Spyrex mid jungle duo, that core, I think performed similarly. I don't think this split they've necessarily popped off and just gone absolutely nuts and just carrying the team. They're doing really, really well. But I would argue they did the same or just as well last split as well on that roster, and it was just more individual
Mm,
things that can happen. And that's the fun of League of Legends, especially once you hit playoffs, right? Nobody knows what's going to happen. Some teams start popping off, and other teams, well, maybe they don't perform as well as they did. So yeah, I think in this particular case, if anything, this split, the one who's the standout player for me at this halfway mark has been actually Scary Jerry on that Maryville roster. We saw him in Converse before
Mhm.
when he was carrying Converse University through CLOL. I think that was 2022, before he got picked up at Maryville. And I had an interview with Scary Jerry actually in the fall season before NACL started, or yeah, fall, winter, where Scary Jerry said he feels like he hasn't been able to, pop off. He's gotten worse, and his peak was that Converse time. I think we're seeing peak Scary Jerry, or at least going back towards that form. And I think that's been one of the big things for Maryville that's really clicking, as Thinkcard was saying earlier. Now he's very experienced. So when he's got other players popping off around him, he knows how to play around that. And then Maryville just looks like a completely different beast. So yeah, that was sort of the standout player to me so far. I think I've been liking the competition. I think it's been very close in NACO so far. And even Mirage Lions, who let's talk about them as well, because they just picked up their first win this weekend. They are now 1-5, and you get 9 games, right? So, or sorry, no, how many? One, two, yeah,
Yeah.
9
Yeah, you get
series.
9 matches.
Yep, they are 2/3 of the way through already before they finally picked up their first series win. Despite their 0-5 record, I never thought they were a bad team. Like the individual players are still really, really good, and I still think they're competitive. And I think we're seeing that this split, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, things might not look as extreme as last split.
Yeah, that's definitely the vibe I'm getting. I mean, just you just look at the names, and obviously there's a ton of roster. There's a ton of talent on this roster. It's just one of
Yeah.
those teams that, from day one, it's just will they click? Will they be able to play like a team? Will they be able to, you know, play sacrifice for each other, make sure they're playing for each other, and just do those things that these other NACL teams are able to do? Or will they all want to be the star of the show? So
Mhm.
I don't know. I like all these players, so I hope that they can figure it out and they can get more wins. But that's definitely the story. It's just there's so much talent on this team. They just need to figure out how to play like a team.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I can definitely feel that for this team as well. Like I had Normology on my other show to talk for a little while where he was
Mhm.
inadvisably transparent about the process that went into those roster changes. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear. Like Mirage felt like they were not gelling with what the original version of this roster was going to be, and it does feel like the double role swap bring in Will move was kind of a Hail Mary to try to, reset, go for a different roster and see if this one's going to be able to do better. And thus far has really been struggling to put it together. But I agree, has shown bright spots on the top side, especially. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like Mirage to me is yeah, it's like a jumping off point to complain about the schedule for me because they have played like they've played 6 matches already and they still haven't played FlyQuest. So I feel like their season's like over. And it's we haven't even played half the matches, right? There's 21 matches played, 24 matches to go. So yeah, I don't know what's going on there, but it feels like there's been a real big imbalance of which teams are playing and when. And I feel like it is kind of exacerbated Mirage's problems that they have had to play such a large percentage of their matches so quickly when they were a roster that had to make so many last minute change or that chose to make so many last minute changes. And yeah, they just got so little time to gel, right? Like a team like
Yeah.
AoE or a team like Fear have played literally half as many matches at this stage of the game and will get to like continue to scrim for additional weeks and use that knowledge to
Mhm.
substantially affect their position in the standings. Mirage feels like they're kind of done. Like their season's basically over. It doesn't. Even if they get substantially better, it may not very well not be enough to move them out of bottom 2 relegation territory at this stage.
Yeah, and I feel like the flip side is kind of true too, right? Like the fact Mirage played AoE. AoE's only had 2 games going into that game. Mirage had 5, right? Like I wonder
Yeah,
if part of it's also AoE doesn't have as much, hasn't had as much stage experience because scrims are one thing, right? And people might argue, oh, it's remote. What's the difference from scrims? Well, if you ever watch some of these scrims, like we average what the 1 kill a minute, 2 kills a minute, 3 kills a minute, somewhere around there for scrims. And you go on stage and you're like, okay, everybody plays a lot safer, right? So scrims aren't the same as stage games. I Yeah, it just feels like you kind of lose out on both ends for both Mirage and AoE in a situation like this. But yeah, I don't know what you can do, right? Because scheduling. Everybody
yeah,
has some sort of issue, one way or another. Yeah. Uh,
yeah.
but yep. I want to go back to something, Thinkard, that you mentioned as well, with this Mirage Alliance team, because like, will they come together? There's a lot of strong voices on this team. Who's willing to sacrifice? Do we feel Like they've sorted that out and they figured out who's going to sacrifice in the AoE game because they won. But I'm going to be honest, I didn't feel like it was necessarily winning as a team. It felt like a lot of really good individual plays.
Let me see. I was looking at the drafts real quick. Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think what's interesting is I'd be really curious to listen to their comms
Mhm.
because it's hard to see from the outside who's doing a lot of the shot calling and who's making a lot of the map movements.
Right.
And I've worked with Dardock, so I know that when he's on point, like he just 1v9s the games through comms. But there are a lot of other vocal players on this team, so I'd be very surprised that's happening right now. So I'm so curious what the communication is like on that team. Like I need to hear it.
Yeah, because I think Alorm said in the post game interview as well that he felt like a lot of the games prior to this, everybody was just talking and nobody was like really listening. So it's just like a
Mhm.
lot of voices happening and nobody's really receiving it. And they kind of just sat down after their last loss and just had an hour of just, okay, guys, let's talk through this rather than ball review and sort this out. Um, yeah, and obviously they won here, but I'm going to be honest, like some of the like RJS, I think had a field day that day, absolutely popping off. Now, obviously, as you mentioned, we don't know the comp, so maybe Dardock will shot calling, but it felt like a lot of heroic play from like Prisma and Dardock as well was popping off in game 3. They dominated that bot lane, and yeah,
Yeah. It definitely feels like comms are
I
rough
think
too,
it's
though.
good.
Like going into like game number 1, right? Like that the Cubby was on cast roasting that play where like RJS is
yeah,
doing
yes, yeah.
it's clearing top outer turret while his team is trying to trade Baron for Dragon, and they can't get the Baron because they don't have the Azir DPS. That was messy. Like that's looking like they're not talking to each other. At least something's off in the comms about what they think they can do. So yeah, I don't know. I hope they continue to get better. I hope they
Yeah.
get into I like I said, they might be doomed to relegation no matter what happens, depending on
Mhm.
how teams like Team Liquid and Disguised do with their back half of their splits. But yeah, I don't know. I hope this team can kind of re-solidify themselves and survive relegation if they do have to go through it and see what they can grow into with maybe some minor tweaks.
What do you guys think about what's happening to TLC so far?
You beat me to the punch. I was going to ask you because you brought on Jenkins in the past, and Jenkins on that roster.
Jenkins looks
Yeah,
great. I mean, that's not Jenkins. Uh,
yeah.
Yeah. I'm surprised. I thought this team was going to be a lot better. I was super excited to see Keel play with this team because I
Yep.
think Keel has been really underrated for a while.
Mhm.
And Jenkins is Jenkins. He just destroys Academy whenever he's in Academy. So I thought this was going to be one of those teams that was going to be at the top. So I'm really, really surprised to see how they perform so far.
Okay, fair enough. I think I'll be honest, I wasn't that high on TLC, and I didn't think that highly of Jenkins coming in this split. And I admit, I was a little
Mhm.
bit further down on Jenkins than I should have been. Jenkins is good, but I do think the top lane pool this split has been really, really strong. And I think Romer
Mhm.
as well in the mid lane doesn't feel like he's quite connected with the rest of the team. I think in terms of plays, I think that's been a major issue when there's so much when mid jungle synergy has been such a big deal in recent patches. Just not having Keo and Romer be on the same page, I think, is putting them in a tough spot. And then when Jenkins can't just win top lane and then provide a stable lane, a safe lane to like kind of snowball off of, there's been issues. So I think TL Challengers, the potential is there, but right now, like, yeah, until they kind of fix that middle of the map, um, yeah, I think other teams are kind of abusing that a little bit right now.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Legitimately, almost every other NACL team has like these very high performing mid jungle duos.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, so sometimes you're a role player in the top lane. You're going to pick something that is pretty dependent on like the other core four players on your team doing well. So yeah, I think that's a
yeah,
very good point. Just looking at basically all the NACL rosters above them, most of them have very high performing mid jungle duos.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also a huge Keel fan. I do
yeah.
something I wonder about this team is I have no idea how Romer's English is. I wonder if this is probably. I feel like this is almost certainly Keel's first time playing with a foreign language player. If it's not that great, I wonder if that's contributing to things a little bit here in their inability to get on the same page, because it definitely feels like they've struggled to get on the same page. I will
Yeah.
also call, like, I have more faith in TLC to turn it around um, than you would think from their standings. Like, the thing about this single round robin format is that it's like really easy to like get trapped looking at the numbers, but they do have a pretty easy back half to their schedule. They still haven't played Mirage yet. They still haven't played Lit yet, who I think most people still have towards the bottom of the table. They had to play Wild Card week 1, where CLOL buff, where Wild Card had been playing for quite a while already together. They've already played Supernova. They've already played FlyQuest. They've already played DSG, and they actually beat DSG. Like, they had a rough start to their schedule, I think. Like, we'll see how we'll see. Again, AOE's only played 3 games, so we'll see how inexcusable it is to drop a series to AOE as time goes on. But I think Team
Yeah.
Liquid will pick up some wins in the back half, given what their schedule looks like.
I actually think it's rough for them to play Mirage Alliance in the back half, because I think there's a better chance Mirage starts to connect in the back half. So playing Wildcard first week and then playing Mirage Alliance end, I feel like that is, or towards the later weeks, is is actually
It's
unfortunate for
tough
TLC.
schedule. It's tough. It's hard. They also, like, yeah, it is actually, like, if you didn't know how the teams were going to be performing, but you just knew the rosters, and like, if you were preseason and you were just trying to develop a schedule to screw over TLC as hard as you could, you would probably build a roster like this, right? They have to play wild card right out the gate. Then they have to. They're the 2 teams that made all the big roster changes.
Yep,
The
biggest
Mirage and
name.
Maryville. You play them at the end after they've got this much time to get better. It's a tough position for them.
And then for
And then
extra
they
spice,
still
you
have to
throw
play
Lit at
Fear as
the end,
well.
the Black Horse team, which nobody knows what they're gonna do. Like,
Yeah, they have to play Fear as well, who's in that same category as AOE, where it's like I think Fear look really good, but it's tough to get a beat on them when they've played 3 matches.
yeah, let's talk about them a little bit too, because they played since they played Lit and ended up going full 3 games. They won. But yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I'm struggling to get a read on the Cincy Fear team. I thought that'd be great going in. I'm personally quite high on Lens as an AD carry. I know he had a rough split, last split, but I still think he's a really good player. You got Philip and Chad topside. I thought that was a good place to go off. Toasty, I know a lot of people in the past have criticized his laning, but I think it's improved a lot. And his team fighting has never been a question. His Nico has been immaculate. Though Nico's banned going forward, right? Because of the bug.
At least for this next week, I think.
Rip.
Probably until 14.4, which will probably be week 6.
Oh man, they just directly nerfed Toasty for 2 weeks. Yeah, so I thought this roster would do pretty decently. But honestly, like, it's been kind of coin flippy, and I don't really know what's going wrong. Like, when it works, it looks great. When it goes wrong, I'm like, I'm not quite sure what happened. Thoughts?
Um, I actually love this roster.
Mhm.
Daption, I was super interested with in after 2021. So I'm still
Mm.
waiting for him to like get his shot to really show what he can do. Like you said, Lens, just incredible performer. Like everyone knows he's just very high skilled ADC. Toasty
Yeah.
Alex is someone who I've had my eyes on for a while. Very young player, but is in a lot of the combines. He communicates well. When he does get leads, he doesn't usually throw it away. He's very good at performing and team fighting with his leads and kind of being able to carry games. So this roster to me is very, very interesting. And I just want them, I want to see more of their games because they have so many
Yeah.
more games left to play.
Okay. Jury's still out, Gordo?
Yeah, I think I mean I agree with loving the team here. The crazy thing about, so Cincinnati Fears played maximum games so far, right? They've gone to 3 games in all their series. They've played 9 games in 3
Oh.
series. And it's like you can. I think I said this last week. You can read into that however you want, right? Did they drop games to Mirage and Lit? Yes. They took a game off FlyQuest though, and I really do think FlyQuest is kind of the bar for the rest of the league, right? This team looks so good, and
Final boss.
I mean,
Yeah.
similarly, that FlyQuest match, it's so hard to figure out what to take away from it. Like, Fear
Yeah.
were so close to being able to win that game number 1. Like, this could have been a 2-0 series for Fear. Um, But then again, that's against like Surdy while he's sick, and how Surdy going 1-9, or what did he add, 1-11 on Rumble or something? Like somehow one of the best players on Fly Challengers just straight running it into Phillip is still not enough to win. So what does that mean? I don't. It's really hard to draw conclusions off of that. So I'm excited to see more of Fear, but I'm higher on this team. Like between Fear and AOE, are the two teams that have played the least by a lot. Fear look way, way better from the sample size we've gotten to see.
A lot of shots at AOE from you tonight, Gordo. Let's talk about
I'm
them.
disappointed in AOE, man. I love this
Was it
team.
the Mirage Alliance loss? Was that it, Gordo?
It wasn't it, but yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to believe after the 2-0 over TLC last week, and they're just still not looking great.
Because they're the team that's in the same situation as Fear, right? Where they've only played three matches. So we have so little tape on them. And they play against Maryville, who, we're all praising. They're top of the table for a reason. They're tied with Fly Clash Challengers. And then they beat TLC, which I think in week 2 was like, oh, that's amazing.
It was week 3.
Week 3, sorry, yeah. Because they didn't play week 2. Yeah, in week 3 it was like, oh, that's really good. TLC's a good team. They will beat them. But are they right now? Like, they haven't quite turned on yet. And then they lose to Mirage Alliance, where it's like, okay, well, that happened. So so are we being a bit harsh on them by saying that, or do we think that they're really not that good?
Well, why do we think they lost to Mirage? Because, like you said, it sounded like RGS kind of had a field day.
Yeah.
And we've scrimmaged against AOE, and
Mhm.
I think some of their lanes are pretty good, to be honest. So I think Rosethorn is very good in organized games. Maybe as soon as there's some chaos, then like he kind of goes into the chaos a little bit. But organized games, he's very strong. So it does seem like it might be something that they're pretty matchup dependent when they play against people that have certain identities and certain skills. Then like the team can perform well against them. So it might have just been like an off day where maybe Mirage actually matches up fairly well against them, just based on laning prowess and their ability to kind of like use their raw mechanics to win skirmishes and win team fights. So who knows? Maybe because like I said, they were pretty good in scrims, so I kind of want to see them play more games.
And I think if we're talking about chaos teams, like I feel like Mirage is right there with Lit right now in terms of like
who could be
not always being the cleanest or not always looking like they have a set game plan. We're watching there, so hey, maybe that Mux actually they're playing Lit next. So you know what? If AOE lose to Lit and then beat Supernova somehow, I guess there's Thinkcard might have just found the problem. Gordo, I know you've ragged on AOE a little bit, but I'd like to know the reason, like behind the AOE.
Well, I rag on AOE because I love AOE. I love this roster so much. This was my favorite team coming into the off season, and I'm just this was my candidate to in a more rational season where everyone isn't beating everyone and the results look a little bit more like people expected. Like AOE was my pick to be like, this team's gonna be top half. They'll be 4th, 5th, up there contending with some of the big fancy rosters of DSG, TL, Fly, and Supernova, and surprising people and putting these guys on the map. So I just see it as a big opportunity for a lot of players that I like. So I'm disappointed to see them not being able to quite put it together. I think Zamudo especially continues to be really flippy. He really struggled against Niles. He really struggled against Alorum. He looked good against Jenkins. So he looked good against Jenkins, and I think he was really good, especially in that TLC series, at buying space for the rest of the team. I liked his Cassante play a lot. I thought he was fifth. He really understood his role there, which is something that I think Niles in particular has been really, really good in over the course of this split. But yeah, I don't know. Top lane is to wind it back a little bit to what you're saying about how strong top lane is in this league right now. Top lane in North America feels so good right now. The pool is just so competitive that these kind of flippy dippy, sometimes they'll win you the game, sometimes they'll throw the game. Zamudo, Quacker, to a lesser degree, Dragoon style top laners. I feel like they will not survive the winter. There's Denethor's on his way. Bradley's out grinding in Korea. He's gonna come back like Goku out of the hyperbolic time chamber. Yujin is a name that people are going to need to start knowing on Morningstar White. Like he's doing
Mhm.
so well too. Like there's so many names. There's so many really great top laners, not just in this league, but coming up from below. I worry about players like that who are so inconsistent when the names coming up look so good.
That is a very, very fair point, which I had not even considered. The upcoming batches, or incoming, I guess, because
Touched on a lot of really cool things there, to be honest, which is just flippy players in general. Because there was a time where being flippy and like just like asserting your dominance was a very effective way to play because people couldn't handle the pressure. But now people are just or just players are getting a lot better, and you see that in the 80 carry role specifically. Like you don't really have those. You can't just be the montage 80 carry every game anymore. You can't just do that. When you get a lead or you get a small lead in the bot lane, it's up to you to keep that. Make sure you're still growing well. Get to the team fight number 2 or 3 with some good items. So it's like I think we're seeing it a lot in the ADC role. Now we're seeing it a lot in the top lane role, and just in general, like the volatile style of playing is it's just not cutting it as much anymore.
Mhm.
So I do think that was a really good point because like stability is now just so important when all these teams are so much better than they were in the past in like the tier 2 league.
Yeah.
man,
Well, in the
it's
top lane in
end of an
particular,
era.
it feels so notable. Like you look at somebody like Tenacity, right? Who like the last
Hmm.
time he was here, he was just slamming everybody. He was like, like unanswerable in the top lane. It felt like when he was on that 100 Thieves Academy team, and now he's here, and it's like he still has his like aggressive picks, and he can still like eke out, like an 8 CS lead at 15 minutes or whatever. But it's not. He just can't like
Yeah.
even with the lower resources, right? It just feels like he can't just run people over anymore. And it feels like this
Yeah,
DSG team was assembled assuming that he would run people over. And it's been tough.
yeah, and I think that similar situation for me with Jenkins, right? Like the fact that Jenkins probably should be performing better, but the competition is just so tough. But I'm glad you bring up Tenacity because that stock Disguise still is Disguise Gaming, pardon me, 1-3 right now. I will say Cubby said this as well in broadcast that Cubby's not surprised by this. I mean, you look at the strength of schedule they had to play. It's
Yep.
FlyQuest, TLC, Wildcard, and MU. Two of which are like at the top. One of which was a dark or just surprised everyone early. And DSG did beat them, and then TLC, who everybody was hyping up before the season. Do we hit the panic button? Or is this where we expected DSG to be?
I'm blanking. Who was DSG's jungler last split?
Last split it was Tomio.
Oh yeah, Tomio. I don't know. This was kind of I didn't expect them to be one of the top teams. When you're bringing
Okay.
in a mid jungle like Perry and Young, you kind of expect you're gonna need to ramp up, and you're gonna even if it might be something where maybe they don't even think they're gonna be one of the best teams this split, or
Mhm.
I mean, they probably have high expectations for themselves, but they know that it's something that it might even be looking into like a summer split kind of thing where they know that these are two players that are obviously insanely talented, but they are
Mhm.
quite young. They do need to find their identity among all these other incredible mid jungle duos in the league. And that's something that I do believe they can do with more time. It just might be more of a summer split thing than a spring split thing.
Okay. Sure. Fair enough. Godo,
Yeah.
you agree?
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as I am on TLC here. Like I think it's a big strength of schedule thing. Like these guys have played both wildcard or not wildcard. Well, they have played wildcard, but
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
beat wildcard. They've played FlyQuest and Maryville already. They haven't played Mirage. They haven't played Lit. Like I think these are some of the lower tier teams. They haven't played AoE. There's space to grow. They will play wildcard later in the season, and wildcard's on like a 3 loss streak right now. They're kind of
Yeah.
falling from grace a little bit. So like I think they will come back later in the season. I really do think like we'll get into next week later. Actually, never mind. I'm not
Sure.
gonna
Sure. Yeah.
spoil my next week take
Okay.
this
So
early. Let's
sounds good. We'll hold the hot take for later. Okay. Actually, maybe this is my hot take. I think Disguise is underperforming, and specifically their bot lane, Minui and Poom. I think Tenacity is still doing good. We already talked about how stats topside is, and Tenacity is still winning more often than not. Perry and Young haven't been terribly explosive, but I think similarly to you, I think they need some time to scale up. That's fine. And they're not doing anything wrong. But Minui and Poom have been losing most of their lanes, and I think their wins have come when Minui and Poom win their lane. So uh, I know that Minui can be a very interesting bot laner, like not necessarily like traditional AD carries. He likes his unique picks. but it hasn't really felt like it's working. And I feel like if this guy's bot lane doesn't step up, I fear that this guys might stay in that lower end of the standings. I know that's a hot take.
Yeah. Also, I know. I mean, I know Nick Smith pretty well in Arrow.
Mhm.
So I do know that he likes coaching the specific style of having early game pressure, and that is
Right.
hard to do when your bot lane isn't performing as well as you think it should based on the draft. So that could
Mhm.
be a pretty important factor of like why they are having some struggles at all.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, the coach is teaching a certain way too. Yeah, and it's not. Hmm. Yeah, well, this guy's for now. I believe the next match will be up against Fear, so that one I think will be a good test for where this guy is actually going to end up. Because I think Cincinnati Fear is kind of like around that middle of the pack
Yeah, I will
currently.
say, I wonder if Anero just doesn't. I wonder if Anero would feel like it's kind of a band-aid or something, and so doesn't really want to go for this approach. But I feel like if I'm DSG and I'm trying to like yank out wins, I would want to get back to the kind of Manui picks. You know, like I think of Manui as like the bot lane mage guy, right? Like I think of
Yeah.
his Ziggs, I think of his Seraphine, I think of his like Senna duos as being really good. I think Smolder can be like a little bit in that territory. So maybe he got one Smolder game last week. I maybe would like to see how he does on some more of those. Like the only real traditional AD carry that I really associate with Manui a lot is Aphelios, which they have been giving him when they can get it, and is where
Mhm.
they've gotten one of their 2 wins. So yeah, I don't know. I would like to. I feel like they are not, and perhaps intentionally, right? Perhaps Manui is trying to like expand his horizons and
Yeah.
make that level up
Yeah,
to be one of the best AD carries in tier 2. Um, so I'm not saying they're like forcing him to do it or anything, but yeah, when your bot lane's not performing that well, I would like to see them maybe get him on his comfort a little bit more.
Oh, I'm just gonna say it's interesting because that probably is like an Arrow's point of view is just like you don't really want to band-aid fix things. You want to make sure you're developing. And a lot of their losses, it's like he's playing Varus against Wildcard, that's an L. He's playing Kalista against Varus, which is a fine matchup, and then he's playing Varus against Varus against TLC. So these are definitely they're obviously losing on these champions, but these are champions you have to get games on and you have to be
yeah,
able to get good at. Especially Varus is always going to come back every few patches and be one of the better ADCs in the game. So um, it might just be a scaling thing for sure as well. That maybe they're just practicing these matchups and they're going to get better as the year goes on.
for sure. Yeah, that's definitely more valuable. I think this is Academy after all, right? Like wins, as you pointed out, I think are
Yeah,
secondary to the players being good and improving. But I didn't want to touch on Smolder
yeah.
because they did play a Smolder game. We had 6 Smolder games out of 7 possible series. So LCS as well. I think you all played it. NRG played one of the first Smolders as well. So small tangent here, but thoughts on Smolder after the first competitive appearances of this champion?
Um, I think it's pretty overtuned. It's like most new champions don't get to 50% win rate. They just don't because
Mhm.
people need to learn the champion and need to get games on it. And this champion, every time I look at the win rate goes up by another 0.5 to 1%. Now it's above 51% win rate. When like a week
You
ago
weren't
it
building
wasn't even
right.
at 50. It was like 45. And so it's just this champion is a little bit overtuned. At least it's not going to get buffed, which they normally do to new champions because people just have like a 45% win rate on it. So
Right.
at least it's not going to get buffed, but people don't know the counters to it yet. Um, so I think we'll just see more and more of this champion. It's safe. It's pretty strong in lane with its W. It scales like a truck.
Yeah,
Until people really know the counters, it's just going to be pick or ban every game.
that's fair. Funny you mentioned win rate because in solo queue, maybe above 50% win rate. So far in the NACL and LCS, we're looking at 33% win rate.
Yeah, that's a small pool though. I still
It
think it's
is.
pretty
It is.
good. Yeah, I think the most standout Smolder games to me this week have been like Tomo's game on it in LCS against Immortals. I think was like pretty classic
Yeah.
Smolder gameplay.
Mhm.
Just got to scale up, hit past the 225 mark. Really, they. I think the thing that spectators maybe, or that often isn't getting communicated in like the casts and stuff that maybe spectators aren't noticing, is that like there's really an exponential curve to the smolder stacks, right? As there are with a lot of champs that have these kind of stacking mechanics. Is like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you start out like just trying to scrounge up like 3 stacks per wave wherever you can, and then at a certain point you're doing enough damage that you just one shot the whole wave, and then you're getting like 10 stacks a minute easily, and really starting to
Yeah.
really starting to like get unlocked. So once you hit like that 30+ minute mark, if you're able to keep farming on your smolder, you just get totally crazy. I think Tomo does that really good in that LCS game. I also think Wixie really does it in the one game AoE wins up against Mirage.
Yeah.
So I mean, those have been my big like go-to. I think that's where like this champion looks best. Those are the most like smolder matters games compared to games where like smolder is picked, but the team's either getting ran over or they're running over the other team, and you could be playing anything and it wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I feel like it's hitting that like old castle win or like level 16 kill levels. With Smolder right now, it's like 25 minutes and the game it's a different game altogether. All of a sudden, you're playing against an elder buff at that point. It's just yeah.
What's crazy is because like the people that are good at stacking on the champion, they'll always get to 225 by like dragon number 4. So it's
Yeah.
that's what's so crazy. And so like even in our game we did not play well at all. We're down like 4,000 gold. FBI shows up to the Baron fight, and we literally probably would have won the fight if he didn't get hit by Kasate Q3. And it's just so crazy to have a champion that scales that hard to be able to consistently hit it before the game deciding fight at like dragon number 4. So it's yeah, I think it's really strong. We'll see more.
It's like
Yeah.
hard to shut down too. It's like really good against dives where you can like flap out of the map. I hate that champ's ability names, dude.
I know.
Oh, when he just canes into the wall when you're trying to dive
Yeah,
him, and then it's
exactly.
like, what do we?
Yeah, like how do we hit this?
Yeah, it's like I don't know. I don't think a champ that scales like this needed that dive resist tool. Maybe that's
No.
one of those things that make your Akali list of mechanics that will be removed from this champ before all is said and done. Maybe that's going to be one of the first ones.
The funny part is I have a bad feeling it's not going to get nerfed like that much for a while because I don't think the solo queue side is going to be quite as broken. At least not maybe at the higher levels where players know how to abuse and actually farm safely and not like run into skirmishes nonstop prior to 20 minutes. But yeah, I can see the win rate being a bit low. Like
It'll be tamped down by LCS playoffs, I bet.
I hope so. Or it's permaban. That's going to be like a red side tax again if it doesn't. Okay. Going back to the NACL, let's talk about wildcard because you mentioned it. Wildcard surprised everybody, starting 2-0, against some pretty good teams. Everybody's kind of down on them. And then they've since slid into 0-3. So 2 straight wins, 3 straight losses. Again, same thing. Is this when we hit the panic button? They lost to DSG, Lit, and Fly Challengers. Now, Fly Quest Challengers, understandable. But the other 2 teams?
It's hard to tell. I think Winnie in general has always been a very momentum-based player. So usually his team does go on like win streaks and loss streaks. And the thing is, every team is most likely going to hit an obstacle. And the question is, can you get past it? And it seems like, Mirage, they're struggling, but they've realized they were struggling. They had their powwow where everyone got to say their 2 cents, and then they're able to win their first series. So now it's okay. Well, were they actually able to get past the obstacle? And that's what's interesting about wildcard, because although I want these players to do well, I want Winnie to do well. He's been grinding for so long. Dark Wings has been a name in this league for a while, and these are players that you want to succeed. So I hope they get out of it. I would say that I feel like they're probably going to struggle for a little bit longer.
Fair enough. Gordo?
Yeah, I mean, I think they came in real hot with having had that kind of practice advantage, and I think Maryville did the same thing last year when they started their first split as well. So I think as more and more CLOL teams get into the NACL space, I think that's a pattern we'll probably see repeat itself in spring splits, especially. Stay tuned for when Winthrop promotes into this league in a couple months. So, I think that'll still remain the case going forward. I think the big question for wildcard is like how are they going to perform like against their peers, right? Like I think they did really well against Mirage and they did really well against Team Liquid. I think they lost to Fly and DSG, which would have been pretty expected. And then that match against Lit is like one of those where it's like kind of a big deal whether you win or lose, right? Because I think those are the teams that are going to be either trying to get into the playoffs in those like mid to lower spots, or they're going to be in relegation. Um, and so it depends on what you mean by the panic button, right? If you mean the panic button for like, hey, we're not going to win the split, maybe, but I don't even think you should have that button if you're wild card. I don't think that was really in the cards for you. Again, no pun intended on Thinkcard or wild card. Uh, but yeah, if the panic button is like, are we going to get relegated? I don't think you have to hit it yet. Like you still have Cincy Fear coming up, you still have AoE coming up. You have. I think those are the matches that really matter, right? Is like getting, even though tiebreakers aren't on head to head, like sneaking in the wins where you can get them there. You already got one against Team Liquid that nobody was really expecting you to get. You can get another win here, another win there. You're going to be having 2 wins already is already a massive boost over Mirage. And then there's only one other team you got to be ahead of.
Sure, that's fair. And if we look at strength of schedule for wildcard as well, of course, they're facing MU, Fear, AoE, and Supernova Love. So not the easiest, but not the toughest either. They don't have like a 4-stack of the best teams coming up. All at the end. That's it for me. I think their win against FlyQuest Challengers says a lot. I think they're fine.
Agree.
I think Lit's a fun team, and that's a team I want to talk about next.
That series against FlyQuest, by the way, that's exactly what I'm talking about with Quacker, man. Surdy just absolutely slams him in game 1. He slams Surdy in game 2. Surdy slams him back in game 3, and that like felt like it was, especially in that first game, like Surdy's Cassante is like 10-0. It's so much of the problem with their game.
Yeah, I was pretty sure that matchup's not supposed to go that way, where like Cracker's getting dove in the turret by Cassante, but
I don't think there's any matchup where you're supposed to go 10-0. That's
yeah, but then he bounced back, and I think like specifically against Lit, like that's an anomaly. And like I said, I love Lit. I think that's my dark horse team. I think they're gonna spoil a lot of matches because they have a very interesting way of playing, and I think their coaching staff and their drafting is going to be very different, or not meta for one. So I think that loss against Lit it is what it is kind of thing. And I think Dragoon specifically is a bad matchup for Quacker. I think Dragoon's really good at punishing these sort of top laners who want to try and take over, unless they're 30 level. And even then, I think Dragoon is going to.
He did do the trundle into Olaf. He did do the thing.
Yep. Yeah, he knew the matchup. Like, he might not have done it recently, but he knows the matchup. So yeah, I think wildcard's fine. This 0-3 slide might become an 0-4 just because they'll be matching up against Maryville, but I think they'll bounce back. They'll be okay.
Well, the crazy thing is, I don't know if they just thought that Dragoon wasn't going to be willing to do the trundle. I know this is a bit of a sidecar, but because I know that Quacker knows about that trundle into Olaf thing. Because I cast an ACL series between Mirage Alliance and it was most of the Lit roster was playing for CCG Esports in ACL this past split. And I remember I interviewed Alorum after the match, and he was talking about the drafts coming into those games, and he was like, yeah, they have to ban Trundle in phase 2 because they want to take Quacker Olaf, and he knows that I will pick Trundle into that, and it's completely unplayable. So it's like 2 months ago, Quacker was well aware that this was completely unplayable, and yet he ends up in this position here in NACL. So that was rough to see from him.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it slipped out of his mind, right? We've not seen.
Yeah,
actually, we have seen some Trundle, but yeah, I
not
guess
maybe
maybe
top,
just thinking about it.
I don't think.
Yeah, to be fair, more in the jungle. So yeah, like I said, I think that's a mini panic button. But let's talk about Lit because I'm pretty happy with what they managed to pull off there. 2-2. I think a lot of people were really low on Lit, and I'm going to start with it. I like their coaching staff. I think Coach Fawn, and I think Elijah's also the coach there as well. I've talked to them a lot about drafts and stuff like that in the past, and they have a different read. They don't care about meta. They want to break meta most of the time. So, like the Seraphine coming in, that Trundle, which we haven't seen in a while. The Mordekaiser up top as well as a counter. I think it can do a lot to that comp. So. I think teams that don't respect the draft might just get run over in draft, and the players themselves are not bad by any means either. Like Dragoon should have been in NACL a lot sooner. So I'm glad he's here now and smashing his way through.
I think I kind of agree with you. I did not expect this team to have 2 wins this early. I think that this is also a scaling team. That's also because their backline is so young. So Messages was one of the last mid laners that we added to the CLG amateur team, like right before we had to disband our CLG amateur team. And he had one of the best attitudes I've ever seen in a player. Just in general, he just wanted to learn. He wanted to fix everyone's problems. He wanted like everyone to treat each other better, and he was like the ideal teammate. He was just like, I just want us to like be having fun and like all this stuff. And it was, it's just something that's so nice to have in a player. And Rockboom was someone who I was talking to after I saw him at some of this combines, and he was performing so well. And he's also an incredibly young player. So coming into it, I knew that this was going to be like a scaling team. So the fact that they're able to pick up 2 wins, I think that, like you said, a lot of it is attributed to the way that they're playing the game and their drafts. They are very creative, and that's cool to see. I think it's awesome when teams are willing to do that, whether it's NACL or LCS. But this is just a team I'm always going to have my eyes on because I'm such a big fan of their backline.
Yeah. Yoda?
I agree with most of that. Like I was a big Messages fan coming into the season. I'm happy to see him finally here. Yeah, Rockboom is clutch as hell. Like this guy has been constantly coming into teams that like as a last minute substitute and like super well performing up into and including this lit team. Where this team had Sejed for the majority of the season. For those who don't know, last split, and Rockboom comes in the midst of OQ2 and is able to get them into the promo tournament and then have them lead them to success. You know what I mean? In the promotion tournament as well to actually get their way in. And yeah, he did the same thing with Rock Bottom, the split before, where they were a team that like came together way later than anybody else and were able to make it to top 2. So yeah, really thrilled with Rockboom and how he's been performing. I also think like Kisno looks like a like solid middle of the pack NACL jungler, and I think that's huge for him because Kisno is on this like he's just so new. He's just on this trajectory. He like came out of nowhere last year, right? He was on like a bottom half OQ team in spring. He got the Supernova job after Hyper got called up to Fly Fam and qualified with Supernova, didn't get to play. Then came in, qualified again with Lit. And I think had a rough promotion tournament. Like if you watched Kisno in the promotion tournament and that was the first you saw of him, you would not be very high on this guy. But I know he caught a lot of eyes in Champs Queue, and he's now looking good in NACL. Like I think this is like the kind of big step up that I wanted from him in Split 2 and didn't really get, and now I'm getting from him in Split 3. And that just makes me excited for where this guy's going because he's super new. Like compared to somebody like Dragoon, right, that you brought up, like he's been playing in tier 3 for years now, and he's always been like right on that cusp. Like Kisno's fresh out of nowhere and has been doing very well.
Fair enough, yeah. And some of their remaining games could potentially be really fun because they still have, let's see who they've got. They've got AoE, Fly Quest Challengers, MU, DSG, and TLC. And while Fly Quest Challengers and Maryville probably don't care whether they win or lose and are expected to win, the others could be spoiled by how Lit performs against them. So definitely a fun team. That leaves us with 2 teams left. And let's start with Supernova, currently sat at 3-1. And I'm going to be honest, I agree with what you said earlier, Thinkcard. I think the loss against Maryville was really close. I think these are their top 3 teams: FlyQuest Challengers, Maryville, Supernova, and I think it could have gone either way. So yeah, Supernova, pretty much I think where I expect them to be. Their match this week against TLC. Trying to remember that match. I actually don't remember that match.
Showed you played ADTF.
Wait, was that? Oh yeah. Wait, actually, that ADTF, I kind of want to talk about it.
Is that going to shock you back into it? That's
yeah. Oh, that was so weird. I was like, what? I don't understand why that build worked, to be honest.
Because they buffed the hell out of it. Because everything on TF scales with AD now.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's actually
So
pretty
that's just it.
Yeah, it's very strong. Yeah. Unfortunately, I've seen it in every role. LEC played it in top lane. It's just something that's going to be played top, mid, and ADC. So we'll see.
Okay. That
That's
I
a
remember
live
that match.
patch gift to you, RMC. I got
Yeah, I had heard nothing about it, and like it came out and I was just like, what is this ADTF? Yeah, I think I think they did pretty well. They lost the first game with the Smolder. Yeah, for Array. I was a little bit sad about that, but I think TL Challengers played really, really well in this series in general. Like they were contesting Supernova. I remember thinking like, man, if this wasn't Supernova, I think if it wasn't like a top 3 team TL Challengers was playing, I think they would have won the series with the performance they had.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agree. I think Keel Romer looked way better in this
Yeah.
series than they have. We talked about that being one of the big problems for TLC. Um, I know we're supposed to be talking about Supernova, but
Yeah.
I think this is the series where the mid jungle I think looked very, very good for them. I think Romer was gapping Shochi a couple of those games, even one of the ones where Supernova won. So that's disappointing. I wanted to see Shoshi really, really take it to the imports there. He's been outspoken about that previously in some circumstances. But I'm happy that the team were able to put it together. I thought the Lux, the Caitlyn Lux they pulled out in game number 2, I thought was really cool. Also, I thought
Yeah.
that worked out for them very, very well. And it's a pick. It's a duo that people don't really respect these days, but I'm happy to see them pull it out.
Yeah.
And I thought Diamond especially executed very, very well on it, like to enable that kind of pick focused comp.
Yeah, I agree. I think Caitlyn's actually been strong for a while, and just people aren't picking her. I think she's great into Kalista and Lucian. But
It's always one of those things that's just so terrifying to play. Like, you make one mistake and the game is just over if you make a mistake in the first few minutes. So it's something that I don't think most teams are down for. I think it's kind of like a Diamond special thing. It's probably giving his team confidence that he can do it, and it's something that it's really good in this area. But the Blitzcrank's a little bit spooky, but they played
Mhm.
around it pretty well.
Yeah,
And as long as the game has some type of control, the TF helps with that as well. Then you'll get some advantages, and you'll get like a really powerful Caitlyn going to the mid late game. So I love that they had the balls to actually pull this off. A lot of LCS teams they think about doing this, but it's like, oh, we make one mistake and the game's over. So I like it. I like it a lot.
so think, are you inspired by that? Maybe see NRG run the.
We got some other problems we have to fix first.
I guess balls are not on the menu. Okay, yeah. I also like Shochi's Annie in game 3 as well. I think Cubby was the one who said that this is a draft straight out of like 2023 or something like that. But I said this before about Shochi. I think last split Shochi was almost forced to be the carry a lot of times for his team. But I really like Shochi as a facilitator when you put him on low econ. And this series, because I think Romer was really popping off, and so the laning was not the easiest for Shochi. I really like the Annie here, and I thought it did so much to just help the team find good engages. And it's a good pick into Akali as well. You don't need to see where she is. Just drop Tibbers somewhere in the Shroud rough area.
This composition's amazing. I like both these compositions, honestly. You have Zyra and Wukong Classic, but then you also have the Calista Renata, which is quite good
Yeah.
into that type of composition. So it is something that, like you said, he's now playing with Kenvi, and Kenvi is quite a good carry jungler. And so he is able to play this more role-playing style and kind of facilitate his team to make sure that Kenvi can carry on these other picks, just like the Wukong, the Vise, things that he's more known for. And so, yeah, I think Shochi's been doing a good job. He can play the carry role and he can play the role of just being a role player very well.
Yeah. Okay, so that leaves us, of course, with FlyQuest Challengers, and they had a match against Wildcard Gaming. They went the full 3 games again, so they're undefeated series-wise, but they've dropped games to 2 teams now. FlyQuest Challengers, are they the undisputed number 1? Do we think Maryville and Supernova can contest them? At least right now, like at the halfway mark.
I wouldn't bet on it.
Okay. Still number 1?
I say it every time we talk about FlyQuest, but this team has 3 LCS players and an LCK player on it. This team's real good.
They bled though. Wildcard made them bleed.
They do. They do bleed. They do bleed. They bend, but they don't break. I don't. At least I've yet to see them break. I think Shaden gets a little loosey goosey with it, especially. I think as when they
30
build
as
up some
well.
of those big leads. But yeah, I don't know. I think Quad and Sturdy are fantastic. I think they're both best at their position in the league, and like this top side is so good that it's so shocking to me how little they have to rely on Sejed's team fighting. Like I think Sejed had a moment. It was even in the game we lost where they lost where he was playing the Vayne, right? but he got like one cool pop off in there where he solo kills the Smolder in the middle of a fight by stealthing through everybody and just playing
Yeah.
it really mechanically well. And I think that was like a little glimpse in the kind of pressure valve that this team has, where if they're not dominating through top side, I actually think Sejed is a fantastic team fighter
Mhm.
that can really take them late too. Um, but yeah, it's like I feel like if you weren't watching amateur, then probably people don't even know what to make of Sejed because they just never need him to do that on this team.
Yeah, that's her.
Yeah, such a well-rounded team, to be honest. It's gonna be hard to beat a team. Well, I think they are gonna drop. They are gonna drop some games, and they're gonna probably
Mm.
drop a series at some point. So it's gonna be interesting to see how they can bounce back from losing a series. But yeah, I just have complete faith in Chime to be able to navigate the game when their laners get a lead. So their laners usually get a lead, and then Chime and Shaden, it's easy for their jungle support to kind of link up, move around the map, and make the game more organized. And like we said, there's a ton of knowledge on this team, so it's quite easy for them to snowball and do the right steps and make sure that they're like keeping tempo and not making fundamental mistakes. Um, so yeah, that being said, like I do think Maryville's very good, and they probably are going to drop a series at some point. But this team for sure is number one for me.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard to argue that. I mean, and Gordo, you talked up Sturdy Shaden. Think you're talking Sajad and Chime. I'll talk up Quad. Quad almost Flame Horizon Darkwings, man. Like in the game they lost, Quad almost Flame Horizon Darkwings. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's just everything's too strong. I actually am not sure they'll drop a single series in the regular season at the rate they're going. That
I
said,
think they could, but I'm not
but
going to predict it in any individual
I
matchup.
mean, yeah, they're facing Lit next week, so they could. Uh, my dark horse Lit. That's it. They actually do have a pretty tough schedule coming out because they face both Maryville. They have yet to face Maryville or Supernova. So both the contenders for that top spot will be challenging them in the upcoming weeks. But yeah, for now, I think we've kind of talked about it. I think the top three teams are in a tier of their own, pretty much. I think everything below that, things can change. I don't think anybody's like particularly locked in or completely shafted because I think Mirage Alliance wins wise, maybe Mirage Alliance is kind of out of it, but I think they can still. I think they can still come together and pull out some wins. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm subject to Fly Challenger. I'm curious on your thoughts, Thinkcard. What do you? I've asked this to a few people. What do you make of this Fly Challengers team choosing to go with Sejed in bot lane as like a rookie who hasn't played an NACL before, when the rest of this team is like, from my understanding, basically the Evil Geniuses roster that could have been, and yeah, like knowing that they're starting a rookie in LCS as well. Like, what do you make of the choice to bring in someone like Sejed versus somebody who's been around NACL tier 2 a little bit longer?
It's very interesting because usually when you bring in like a rookie or someone who is so new at the LCS side, you want someone who is a stable backup just in case like the person moves in LCS. I think this shows two things. One, how much faith they have in Masu and that they just are like, this is our guy. He's going to do well. We can get a development piece in Academy. And then two, just how good Sejed is because he is very good at team fighting. I do still think there's a lot of things he needs to work on for his game because he's so new. But it just shows like they've already seen. I mean, we've just seen across the board. You have these veterans, and you bring in one or two rookie pieces. They develop super fast, and I do think he just has the right environment to develop super quickly and become basically another top ADC talent in the region when they have Masu already developing in LCS. So I think that they've done a good job of just pinpointing these two players, and I'm really curious to see where he's going to be in a few months to maybe like a year from now, and how he's going to be able to just develop his game over time because I'm just a big fan of a lot of the moves that FlyQuest has made this year, and I think this is one of their good ones as well.
Yeah, I especially love the point you bring out that they have so much confidence in Masu. Because when they put together this
Mhm.
FlyQuest Challengers roster, this is before Masu has performed, before we see that FlyQuest is off the table at 7-2, right? So, yeah, and props to them. Like, they did their scouting, I guess, and they know who's worth bringing on. Because even on this NACL side, right, Sajed has been showing his stuff and definitely proving that sure, no comp experience doesn't matter. He's up there. That Vayne performance especially. Against Wildcard really sticks on my mind because who's playing Vayne in this day and age competitive? Like that you think Caitlyn Lux is a ballsy pick? I think Vayne like tops that. So yeah.
Yeah, we
For
saw
sure.
Vayne in LCS. It didn't go too well.
Yeah, true.
Yes. This is a different era's top prospect. Yeah. I think that's as good a spot as any to maybe take a quick peep towards week 5 before we close things out. Asking you guys any thoughts or hot takes coming into week number 5. Just looking ahead at what the schedule is going to look like, what matchups we're going to end up having. It's going to be 6 matches, 2 days of 3 matches each at the regular LCS time. So yeah, I mean, schedule, matchups, anything specific stand out to you, Thinkcard or RMC?
Um, I think DSG versus Fear is going to be pretty cool. Honestly, after you were talking about DSG's bot lane, I was just kind of going through a bunch of their drafts, and they actually win substantially more of their games when they have a range support, which they're able to. It's kind of more likely you're going to win lane with a range support than when they're playing a melee support. So I'm curious how they kind of adjust their style over time. And maybe they just go more into the range support style of just playing like Melios and Sennas and stuff that it's more simple to like get that pressure in lane and then kind of hold it. Um, and maybe if they can do that, they can have just a better idea and more control going into the game. So I'm pretty curious to see if they just kind of pinpoint that themselves and go to play more range supports in their match against Fear.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. I didn't even notice. Yeah, definitely something I'll be keeping my eye on now. Obviously, it's got to be FlyQuest Challengers versus Lit because it's a hard run for FlyQuest Challengers. I'm kidding. For me, I'm actually kind of looking down at Team Liquid Challengers versus Fear because to me that we are at the halfway mark and it feels like a watershed moment right now for TLC. Romer had a good week this week, but they didn't win against Supernova, and they need to start picking up wins. So I need to see if Romer really has kind of adapted to the team and the team can come together to start picking up wins or not. And if they can't, then yeah, TLC. If they can't win this week, then I believe they actually have a decent chance at being one of the 2 relegation teams at that point. So for me, it's a make or break week for them.
Mm-hmm.
That one's Toasty's big chance too. Toasty was tweeting before he played quad that got to play quad and prove that NA Talent has what it takes to go against Korea in the future. And then he lost and he tweeted, "All right, NA Talent is doomed. Quad's actually way too good."
I love
So
Toasty.
round 2 now, he's against Rover. Here's his chance. See if he's going to be able to do it. For me, I'm keeping a close eye on Lit AoE for kind of that same reason. Like I've been saying, kind of throughout, like TL, DSG, I think those are kind of like fake bottom of the table teams. I think they will have easier back halves of the schedule, and I think they will move up. And once they move up, I think that some of these teams that are currently middle of the pack, but are forecasted to be lower on the table, will move down. And like I said, those matchups against each other become very important then for where you're going to be able to eke out those wins and where you're going to be able to avoid those bottom 2 spots. I think Lit AoE may very well be one of those matches. I'm still holding out hope that AoE are actually really good and they're going to like slam a bunch of the back half of this season, but I don't know that yet. And so assuming that that's not going to be the case and that they are going to be fending in the bottom half, beating a team like Lit is very important to cement your spot in the league for next split.
Yeah, we have two best of 3s from AoE, so we're gonna see a big portion of the games we've seen so far of them played in those 2 days. So I'm pretty excited to see. Honestly, just that they can stay organized, to be honest, and if they let Rosethorn kind of dictate the game.
Oh,
Yeah.
I just realized we have 2 from Fear this week as well, and Fear has given us only 3 game series so far.
Yeah, this is one of those things
fun.
that like is so like I still don't get this schedule. Like I don't know what it
We'll still suck
means,
on
but
that.
like why do Fear and AoE only play on the same day? Like why is that
I don't
true for
know.
the whole season? Because it's like Fear and AoE played week 1 Sunday, Fear and AoE played week 3 Saturday, Fear and AoE played week 4 Sunday, Fear and AoE play week 5 Saturday
And
and
then they
week
desync.
5 Sunday, and then they finally desync. It's very strange. I don't know what there even is to read into that.
Gordo,
It's very
I think the
strange.
alphabet soup is trying to tell you something.
I don't know. It's not getting through to me. So that's all
It's
this.
the chat GPT schedule for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I hope they fix this for next split. I don't. Maybe it's like I keep looking at it over and over again, trying to like piece together a lot. Like maybe they're trying to balance how many games each team plays on each patch. So I got to look at it in like 2-week blocks, and it still doesn't make sense. I don't. It's not. I can't piece it together. I can't figure out what the numbers mean, Mason. So somebody please let me know if you could figure it out. Otherwise, I hope they figure this out for next season. But with that said, stay tuned to the NACL. I think that's going to do it for our episode here. Thanks so much for hopping on, Thinkcard. It's been awesome talking to you. Anything you want to shout out? Anything you want to say before we close out for the night?
Just shout out to you guys. I think it's really cool that honestly most of the people that are involved with NACL are super passionate about it, and it helps a lot. I think it's awesome. And then shout out to all the players in NACL, going through the grind every day, working with their teammates, unifying together with one goal of just being the best they can be. And then shout out to NRG and Supernova, very talented people on both staffs and very talented players all around. So just really excited to see what we have in store over the next few weeks and what NACL has to offer over the next few weeks as well.
Awesome. Well, stay tuned to NACL. Stay tuned to Supernova. We'll have more episodes of Interstellar Radio coming in throughout the rest of the season. That's going to do it for tonight. So thank you all again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.